Good afternoon. Officially welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our Public Service Loan Forgiveness webinar. My name is Allie Smith. I'm an associate here at Penn State's Sokolov-Miller Family Financial and Life Skills Center. We brought our whole team together today to put on this webinar for you. So Sarah Metzger is also here. I'll let her pop in and introduce herself as well.
Hey, y'all. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're tuning in from. I am a colleague of Allie's, really excited about that. Happy to talk with you all about loan forgiveness today. I do a lot of overseeing of group programs here at the center, so I'm often like the face. You maybe have seen me in times past, but welcome. So glad you're here. And I'll turn it over to my counterpart, the other half of the Sarahs.
Hi, everyone. I am the other Sarah in the office. I do a lot of one-on-one appointments with students, but I also take a lot of appointments with staff regarding public service loan forgiveness. So I may be the face of that if you need any additional help after this webinar. We're glad you're here.
Thanks, Sarah. So if you need help, need extra assistance after today's webinar, you might either be meeting with me or Sarah D. We are here to help. Anyway, we are all here clearly, and we're excited to be sharing this webinar with you today on public service loan forgiveness. It's a great program that all full-time staff here at Penn State are eligible to pursue to have a portion of their federal loans forgiven. I believe we do also have a few folks tuning in from the Navy, so rest assured this information does apply to you as well. So today's webinar will really serve as an information session on the Public Service Loan Forgiveness or PSLF program. Today we'll cover the basic roles of the program that are always true, along with some changes that are happening in the program right now to temporarily expand eligibility. We will have some time at the end for Q&A. We're going to be covering a lot of information today though, so I will say we plan to answer most of the questions that you guys submitted through your registration. For now, we have disabled the Q&A, but we will open it back up at the end and we'll have time for Q&A. If you come up with a question, write it down so you don't forget. And if we don't answer it throughout the webinar, please ask during that Q&A portion. We also ask that you don't ask questions in the chat during the webinar for the same reason. If there is like a technical difficulty or something and you can't hear what we're saying, please let us know through the chat. Otherwise, let's reserve the chat for helpful links that are going to be coming through from Sarah D. All right, so with housekeeping items out of the way, before we dive in, just a quick little introduction to who we are and what we do here at the Sokolov-Miller Family Financial and Life Skills Center. The center is really a hub for financial literacy resources for the entire Penn State community. We primarily serve students, but we also have resources available to faculty and staff, alumni, parents, and even prospective Penn State students. So we're really a place to engage with anything related to managing your money. One of those things being loan repayment and forgiveness. And since we do have some expertise surrounding these forgiveness programs, we wanted to offer some of that information to you. The PSLF program is a great one to take advantage of if you're eligible. So we are happy you're here today, and let's get started. First, just a little bit about what we are talking about today and what we're not talking about today. We're going to talk about the basic requirements and temporary changes in the PSLF program. There is a lot to unpack with PSLF. And in a perfect world, this is a simple program that is easy to follow, but policy has changed. We've seen some temporary waivers in the last few years, and the Department of Ed has really been working to try and renovate some of the issues with this program that are preventing people from actually getting the forgiveness on their loans that they deserve. With all of these things happening, PSLF can get kind of sticky and complicated. There are a lot of details. So let's start with identifying what public service loan forgiveness is. It is just one of several loan forgiveness programs that are offered on federal student loans. Listed on the screen here, you'll see some of those other federal loan programs. So when you hear loan forgiveness, that's not one specific program or one specific thing. There is Perkins loan forgiveness, teacher loan forgiveness, income-driven repayment forgiveness, which we will actually touch on that quickly today because there are some relevant updates there. And then there are also various other programs for different fields that people might work in, especially the health industry. Public service loan forgiveness, though, is by far the most comprehensive of these programs because it offers total and complete forgiveness on federal student loans at the end of the repayment period. So with the understanding that all these other loan programs do exist, we are going to zoom in on public service loan forgiveness and do a deep dive so you have a good understanding of if you are eligible or not and what steps you need to take if you are interested in pursuing PSLF. For information on any of these other programs you see on the screen, visit studentaid.gov or feel free to reach out to us if you have specific questions. All right, so I'm sure you've heard a lot of buzz and news regarding temporary changes that have been made to the PSLF program in the last few years. Starting in October of 2021, the Department of Education instituted some temporary changes surrounding eligibility for PSLF. They did this through a waiver, which has since technically expired. However, some of the things within that waiver are still true, even though we're not technically in that waiver period anymore. So at this point, they're just calling it the IDR account adjustment, which is not a very fun name, but it is what it is, right? So if you are someone that had not qualified for PSLF in the past because of maybe an incorrect loan type or payment plan type or some other reason, you may need to make some changes to your loans or submit some forms before April 30th of this year to make your payments eligible and be counted towards your public service loan forgiveness payment count. As far as we know, after April 30th, we are going back to normal PSLF rules. So right now, this is really an opportunity for people to get their payment counts to where they should be before we go back to basic requirements. So for purposes of this webinar today, it is important that you understand what the basic requirements are, along with what changes are happening that might affect you. So we're going to first work through the normal roles for this program, which if you're looking at the screen here, those are on the left column. And then we'll talk about the temporary changes that are happening right now and what you need to do to navigate or take advantage of those changes, which is on the right column here. So at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Sarah Metzger to tell you about the basics of the PSLF program. So these are the things that are always true about PSLF.
Perfect. Thanks, Allie. Can you still hear me okay? All right. Last time I feel like I had a mic issue, so we're just making sure we're good. All right, everyone. So let's get in with the basics. You know, honestly, the PSLF program is actually really straightforward when the normal rules are in effect. So to our government's credit, it's a pretty easy to follow program, as Allie had mentioned earlier. We've got a visual that we're going to open this book up, and it's going to hopefully make really clear, like, what are all the different criteria you need to hit in order to be eligible to have your remaining loan balance forgiven. So let's crack open here. Aha, here it is. All right, so we have a handy dandy overview of PSLF at work when everything is going as it should be, right? So to receive forgiveness in the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, PSLF, you must make, number one, 120 qualifying monthly bill payments on your federal direct student loans. And while you're making those payments on your direct loans, you must be in a qualifying repayment plan and you must be working full-time for a qualifying employer. You must also be employed by that qualifying employer or another one when you apply for and when you receive forgiveness. So that's what you see happening in this visual here. This is a program that is meant to benefit public servants. If you spend some time working in the public sector, but then step away to work private industry, like that benefit, this PSLF forgiveness is not going to be available to you. So this is really meant to benefit folks here at Penn State, in the Department of Navy and elsewhere, right? We'll talk more about who these qualifying employers are. These key areas that you see on the screen, they overlap and the rules are really firm when PSLF is running as it is intended to run. So let me give you an example. Let's say you are on a qualifying repayment plan and you're making monthly payments on your direct loans, but you aren't working for that qualifying employer. The payments that you make are not going to be eligible and they're not going to count towards the 120 payments that you need to receive PSLF. So that said, it's really important that you are monitoring annually, at minimum annually, monitoring that you are meeting each of these areas of eligibility at the same time. I'm going to dive deeper into them so you understand the nuances, but I can't stress enough, and I know Allie and Sarah would say the same, like PSLF is something that you are monitoring over time, monitoring your eligibility and making sure that you are staying within the parameters laid out here, these requirements of the program, okay? I'm going to take a peek here. I'm going to just throw in the chat a quick link. So, I mean, you're hearing from me, but I'm the messenger, right? If you want to come back and look more at this information in depth, you can hop on over to studentaid.gov. This is where all the information comes from. We're not making this up. This is the program and where it's housed. So always a good idea to go to the source too. All right, so let's talk direct loans. Let's talk what eligible loans are in the eyes of this PSLF program and its requirements. Looking at the list that you see on the screen here, the following loans are eligible: direct unsubsidized undergraduate and graduate loans, direct subsidized loans that you would get as an undergraduate student, direct graduate plus loans that you maybe have taken out to fund your graduate student studies, a direct consolidated loan, and even a direct parent plus loan. But we've got a little asterisk there because direct parent plus loans have some special considerations when it comes to receiving PSLF forgiveness. And Allie will talk a little bit more about that. Sarah is really knowledgeable about those special considerations as well. So you'll hear from them as we get towards the second half of this presentation. But if you've got one or a mix of these eligible loans, you are already off to a good start to pursue loan forgiveness through this PSLF program. If you have an ineligible loan, an FFEL loan, or a Perkins loan, that changes things. These are not loans that are eligible under the normal rules. Now, with that in mind, there are some more kind of asterisks we can build in there, and Allie and Sarah will talk a little bit more about that. But assuming that we're going to get back to the normal program rules, like this is what you want to be mindful of, that you are dealing with direct loans, and direct loans are going to be the only loans that qualify for PSLF, okay? So I know we probably have lots of questions about our loans and how they, become eligible, what to do with the Parent Plus loan. Write that question down. We're going to open the Q&A as we get towards the end of this presentation, and I want you to plug that question in so we can address it. But for now, it's just the basics. So these are your different direct loans that are eligible for the program. If you are not sure what type of loans you have, I highly encourage you to log into studentaid.gov, right? Plug in your credentials, get yourself onto the dashboard, and that dashboard is going to give you an overview of all the different loan types that you have, plus some more information. But this is a good starting point if you're just trying to take stock of what do I have right now that may be eligible for loan forgiveness. Now on to qualifying repayment plans. You need to make 120 payments. I mentioned this earlier. Each of these 120 qualifying payments that you make as part of PSLF have to be made while you are in a qualifying repayment plan. If you are familiar with the federal government and the federal, student loan programs, there are different repayment plans out there, but not all repayment plans are going to work for PSLF. The repayment plans that you see on the screen, they do qualify under these normal and firm PSLF rules. So we've got the default repayment plan for most loans being the standard plan, that 10-year standard plan. It's a hang up. If you really think about it, there's a hang up with this 10-year standard plan because it really equates to 120 monthly payments. Well, you need 120 monthly payments to qualify for PSLF. If you're in a standard plan and you make all of those 120 payments over the course of that plan's terms, you're going to get to your last payment, which will get your balance to zero, and you'll also have nothing then to be forgiven, which is not what we're going for with this PSLF program. You need to be strategic. The idea is you want to opt into an income-driven repayment plan that is going to give you the lowest monthly payment possible, so that after meeting the criteria, these 120 payments and everything else, you've got the largest remaining balance to have forgiven at that time, right? Now, if you are in a standard plan for any period of time, you're working towards loan forgiveness, don't stress out, right? You can switch into another plan if you really are trying to pursue PSLF and have a portion of your loans forgiven. So you can always make that switch by logging into studentaid.gov or contacting your loan servicer directly. They will help you make that switch into the SAVE plan, which is brand spanking new. The pay as you earn plan, we call that PAY. As well as income-based and income contingent repayment. Okay, so these are the plans you want to be looking for when you're confirming that you're meeting the criteria. Just as a note, aside from the 10-year plan, SAVE, PAY, IBR, and ICR, these are all what we call income-driven repayment plans. And these plans are going to calculate a monthly payment that is based on something like 5 to 25% of your discretionary income, which again is how you're able to significantly lower your monthly bill. I will just note that 5% that's a nice number to hear. So far as I've heard from Sarah DeWolfe, that 5% will kick in come July. But even still, there's some more nuance in terms of calculating what percentage of your discretionary income will be factored in. But just know that the range is somewhere between 5 and 25%. Okay. All right. Onward. Let's talk qualifying employment. It doesn't matter what your job title is. It matters who employs you. Okay. So let's talk about what qualifying employment is. I mentioned earlier that this is a program intended for public servants, like those of us who work at Penn State Health, Department of Navy, and elsewhere. Really, if you are working for an organization that is a 501c3 tax status, nonprofit organization, or any level of government, so we're talking local, state, federal, tribal, any level of government, you are working for, in most cases, a qualifying employer. Now, I say that it doesn't matter what your job title is, it matters who employs you. There are some instances where you might be working for the federal government or state government, but you're working as a contractor. It really matters who pays your bill, like who pays you, who signs your paycheck, and where are you getting your W-2 each tax year. That's how you're going to determine if your employer qualifies based on these criteria. Nonprofit, any level of government, even, in some cases, volunteer programs like AmeriCorps and Peace Corps, as well as military service, this all can count as qualifying employment. Now, additionally, something to be mindful of. So it's not just working for the employer, like saying I get a kind of paycheck, you need to make sure you're working full time for this qualifying employer. And again, this is during all of those 120 payments. So full time, how do we define that? Full time has a definition, according to HR, to your employer. Here at Penn State, there's a definition of what full time actually is. In the eyes of the government, it could also be 30 hours per week. So it's going to be either based on what your employer stipulates as full-time or at least 30 hours per week per the government's requirements for PSLF, right? Whichever is greater. It is possible to be employed for more than one qualifying employer part-time, where you are combining, hours worked for an average of at least 30 hours a week. So you can kind of, stitch together, quilt together different work in different spaces, assuming that the employer is qualifying in the eyes of the PSLF program requirements, just so long as you get up to that 30-hour minimum requirement threshold. It doesn't have to be consecutive months or years of employment. If that said, you need to make sure that you are employed while you're making these qualifying payments. But if there is a gap in your employment history, let's say you're out of the workforce for a period of time, or you step away into private industry and then maybe come back to public service, that's okay. You're not going to get credit for the months that you were gone, but you do pick right back up where you left off the moment you re-enter into qualifying employment and you're making those qualifying payments, assuming all of the other requirements are being met. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. I think that's especially important to know for younger folks. I represent the millennial generation. We tend to job hop a little bit, so you want to be mindful of how you can leverage this requirement in your favor, right? Now, if you're not sure whether or not your employer qualifies, don't worry. The government is trying to make this as easy as humanly possible. And the Department of Ed has developed what they call the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Help Tool, the PSLF Help Tool. And by going to studentaid.gov and accessing that help tool and plugging in some information about yourself and where you work, you're able to confirm whether or not your employer qualifies. You may be familiar with this help tool already if you've explored PSLF within the last couple of years. It's been around since 2018, but if you're new to seeing this, absolutely get on to studentaid.gov as soon as you can /PSLF and play around with this help tool so you can be absolutely sure that your employer qualifies. We'll also talk a little bit more. Allie will get into this. The help tool not only makes it clear whether or not your employer qualifies. It will also give you some information about what to do with your loans, really, what you can do to help set yourself up for success with this program. And the output is a PDF of the PSLF form that you'll have to submit. And Allie's going to talk more about that later. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop, so to speak, which again, the government trying to help us in this process, which is good. We want this to be as easy as possible. All right, so I'm going to wrap up talking about the basics with just a note about what these 120 qualifying payments are all about. It's the last area of eligibility that I'm going to address as part of the normal rules for PSLF. You have to make these 120 qualifying payments. The question is, what qualifies as qualifying? It's of course going to be any on-time monthly payment that you're making in full. So if you're just in that income-driven repayment plan and you're making payments month after month after month, and you make your 120 payments and all the other criteria checks out, you're good, right? But it could be a little bit more than that as well. Qualifying payment could be multiple partial payments in 1 month. But keep in mind, multiple partial payments in a month are going to count just as one payment. And any payment will need to be received within 15 days of the due date. So it's not like you can go and in a month's time make 30 different payments and go, oh, I've got 30 different qualifying payment credits towards the 120 that I need. no, there's not a way to fast track this. You will have to make those 120 qualifying payments. You can do lump sum payments. So again, it's not necessarily fast tracking, but if that works for you in financial planning purposes, you can make lump sum payments so that you can pay ahead on your loans up to 12 months, and that will give you credit for 12 months of qualifying payments, assuming that you're in the right plan and all of this other criteria, of course, is checking off, right? If you have been in the AmeriCorps or the Peace Corps or in the Department of Defense, there are some exceptions that apply to this. So if you were in like military deferment or Peace Corps deferment and you paid ahead on your loans, it's a slightly trickier situation, but in most cases, those times will count. But I think for most of us, we'll just be making these payments, 120 of them, right, as usual, in the qualifying plan, on track to reach PSLF and have loans forgiven, right? So that's the basics of it. Hopefully that was clear and straightforward. You guys got to know this like the back of your hands, because at some point the government is going to say, we're done with these exceptions, updates, little asterisks next to everything, and we'll go back to these normal rules. And you want to make sure year after year, as you work towards the 120 payments, you're doing exactly what you need to. So you're not spending any more on those loan payments than you absolutely have to. I'll give it back to you, Allie.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. So like Sarah said, it's so important to be aware of these basics moving forward because they really are the backbone of this program. But you've heard us say already a few times, of course, that there are some changes that make things a little more complex, right? These changes stem from this one-time IDR payment count adjustment. IDR is just income-driven repayment. So it's the income-driven payment count adjustment really driving these changes. This in and of itself is relevant to PSLF, but is also kind of separate from PSLF in a way. So what's going on right now is the Department of Education is conducting this payment count adjustment to update borrowers' payment counts, and this will continue through this summer. This payment count adjustment applies to a few different groups of folks. So anyone who is currently or has ever been on an income-driven repayment plan for their federal student loans, anyone who's in the PSLF program, and also anyone who's planning to switch their federal loans to an income-driven repayment plan. Now, how this is supposed to work is if you're on an income-driven repayment plan or working towards PSLF, your remaining loan balance gets forgiven after you make the required number of payments. So for PSLF, that's 10 years or 120 payments. For IDR, it's 20 or 25 years worth of payments, depending on your loans and your repayment plan. In the past, there were a variety of reasons why some months of payments may not have been credited toward loan forgiveness, whether that's PSLF loan forgiveness or IDR plan forgiveness. For example, maybe you spent some months making payments when you were in an ineligible payment plan. So with this payment count adjustment, the Department of Education is basically just combing through everyone's federal student loan accounts and counting how many payments they have made on their loans. All months in repayment are being counted regardless of payment plan or loan type. Every payment is being counted. If a payment counts for this IDR adjustment, it can also count towards PSLF, as long as you were working for a qualified employer at the time that you made that payment. So this is different from the normal rules, right? Like all of these payments are counting. This is a temporary thing. This is their solution to get everyone updated and get people's payment counts to where they should be. So borrowers with loans that have accumulated eligible time in repayment of at least 20 or 25 years will see automatic forgiveness. And this is through the IDR forgiveness. And that's even if they're not currently on an IDR plan. So when we talk about public service loan forgiveness, we talk a lot about consolidating loans to make ineligible loans into direct loans. If you remember what Sarah sorry, Sarah, butchering your name. If you remember what Sarah said earlier, direct loans are the only loans that are eligible for forgiveness, right? So when we don't have direct loans and we want to pursue PSLF, we've got to consolidate those loans to turn them into direct loans. This is why we talk a lot about consolidation when we talk about PSLF. Typically, when you consolidate a loan, you create a new loan and you lose all payment history associated with your old loan. So you would actually lose payment counts by consolidating. And again, we know payment count is important for PSLF because we need 120 payments to have our loans forgiven. So under this IDR payment count adjustment, you are able to consolidate your loans to make them into eligible loans for PSLF, so turn them into direct loans without losing your payment history on your old loan, as long as you consolidate before April 30th. So this is important, right? Additionally, I also want to note that the Department of Education is encouraging folks who have commercially managed FFEL loans, Perkins loans, or health education assistance loans to also consolidate by April 30th to get the full benefits of this payment count adjustment. So let's talk more about how this affects PSLF and really kind of zoom in on these changes here. The most significant change is that payments that would not have previously counted towards your PSLF payment count because they were the incorrect loan type can now be counted. So right now you can receive credit for periods of repayment on any federal loan type. We know, again, direct loans qualify for PSLF, right? So if your loans aren't direct loans, maybe they are FFEL or Perkins loans, you'll just need to consolidate them into direct loans before April 30th, 2024. If you consolidate your loans and submit your PSLF form, payments that you made on those loans while they were, for example, Perkins loans or FFEL loans, while working for a qualified employer will count towards your 120 payments towards public service loan forgiveness. So under this temporary update, you can keep your payment history attached to the loan when you consolidate. And this is until April 30th, okay? Hopefully this is making sense. Parent Plus loans are tricky because, like Sarah said earlier, they are already direct loans. So technically, as direct loans, they are eligible for PSLF. But Parent Plus loans themselves only have 3 repayment plan options, and those are the standard plan, the graduated plan, and the extended plan. Out of those 3, only the standard plan is an actual eligible repayment plan for PSLF. But remember again what Sarah said earlier, while the standard plan is technically a qualifying payment plan, you don't want to make all of your payments under the standard plan, because then at the end of this 10-year period, when you would receive forgiveness, there's nothing left to forgive, right? But there's a caveat. Parent Plus loans can be consolidated, which then makes them eligible for one more payment plan, which is the Income Contingent Plan, or ICR. So remember that payment counts are only sticking with consolidation loans if they're consolidated before April 30th. So if you have Parent Plus loans and you've got some payment history already on your Parent Plus loans and you're hoping to pursue public service loan forgiveness, you might want to think about consolidating before April 30th. I do want to note, though, that payments under this ICR plan, which is the only option for an income-driven repayment plan for Parent Plus loans. These payments for ICR are typically significantly higher than some of the other income-driven repayment plan options. And, generally Parent Plus loans are just a little tricky. So if you have them and you're trying to navigate public service loan forgiveness, we do suggest scheduling a consult with us, and we'll tell you how you can do that at the end of the webinar. So as for type of repayment plan, any payments made accidentally on plans not listed as eligible for PSLF, such as an extended plan or a graduated plan, those payments will count under this temporary period. Also, if you have a period of repayment where you are late making payments, now is the time to submit a form and see if you can have some of those payments count from the past. Periods of time when you were in a deferment or forbearance and not actually required to make payments also might count. So if you spent at least 12 months in consecutive forbearance or at least 36 months in cumulative forbearance, those periods of forbearance will actually count as payments, and that's just right now. Also, any months spent in economic hardship or military deferments in 2013 or later are also counting as payments. Navy folk, maybe that might be relevant to you. And then lastly, any months spent in deferment with the exception of in-school deferment prior to 2013 will also count as payments. So generally, if you're navigating anything on this list to the right here, it's a good idea to, of course, consolidate if you need to. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But also to fill out a PSLF form and submit it to get clarification on whether you can get some of these payments to count or not. So this has been a lot of information so far. So let's talk concrete next steps. Where do we go from here? The first thing you'll want to do is log into studentaid.gov and go to loan details and just check and see what types of loans you have. Do you have an FFEL loan? Do you have a Perkins loan? Do you have a Parent Plus loan? Maybe you already have direct loans and then you're good to go. But ideally, what you want to see when you log in here is direct listed in the title of every single loan under your loan details. If they're not direct, you'll need to consolidate them into direct loans to be eligible for PSLF. And again, you need to do this before April 30th to get those previous payments that you've made on those loans count towards your 120. Your next step then is to submit a public service loan forgiveness form to all of your previous or current public service employers. So you're wanting to get a record with these forms of every place you've ever worked at while you've made a payment on your federal loans after 2007. And then finally, you're going to have all of these forms in hand from every single employer stating that you worked with them during that period of time. And then you'll submit all of your forms to the loan servicer, MOHELA. MOHELA is the only loan servicer doing the public service loan forgiveness, so your forms have to go to them. And if MOHELA isn't already your loan servicer, all of your federal loans will transfer to them, so they will become your new loan servicer. So we keep talking about the form. This is the form. The easiest way to find this form is to go to studentaid.gov or even Google public service loan forgiveness form or PSLF form, and that should be the most current version of the form. Be sure to check the expiration date, and this is kind of funny. Usually we would say here, like, make sure this form isn't expired, but surprise, this form is expired, and this is the actual form that they are using right now. So you're going to want to find the form that has expired on November 30th, 2023. That is the correct form. I'll also note here that you can use the PSLF help tool that Sarah talked about earlier to help you fill out and send this form to your employer for verification. But as far as we know, Penn State HR prefers you to send it through the HR portal. We'll show you how to do that in a minute. So from our experience, this is kind of the best way to do that with that in mind, you know, knowing how Penn State prefers to receive these forms. To complete this form, you just need to fill out the first page, all of the information at the top here. We do recommend leaving your social security number out for now while you get your employer to fill out the section that they need to fill out. If you believe you've already made your 120 payments and are eligible for forgiveness now, you can check that box that says, I believe I qualify for forgiveness now, and request a forbearance while my application is being processed. Otherwise, you just fill out the top with all of your information. Your employer will fill out the rest of this for you. So they will answer according to the records that they have, how long you were working for them, whether you are full or part-time, and your average number of hours per week. So number 6 here, your average hours per week is really what matters here. That number needs to be over 30 hours a week in order for that period of employment to count. If you worked multiple public service jobs at the same time, say 15 hours weekly at one job and 15 hours weekly at another, as long as they're both public service employers, those payments can count. Your total hours worked for payments to count just has to be over 30 hours. So it is okay if those 30 hours come from multiple jobs. You would just need to submit a separate form to each employer in that case. All right, so you'll fill out the top. You'll send this over to your employer, all of your previous public service employers who you've worked for while making loan payments on your federal loans, right? Even if you worked for them during that period during COVID when we weren't required to make any payments on our loans, those $0 payments still actually count as payments. So be sure to submit forms to those employers as well. Now, this is going to really be a different process for every place that you worked, and we'll talk about what Penn State wants from us. But generally, employers will fill this out, Section 4, and send it back to you. You'll need to kind of collect all of these forms together because you'll want to send them all into MOHELA together. And then once you've got all of these forms back from your employers, you can go ahead and fill in your Social Security number and sign it where needed. They will look for an ink signature, so be sure to actually print it out and ink sign it. This form is 9 pages long, but the other 7 pages, other than what we're kind of seeing here, don't need to be filled out at all. Those are just instructions. Section 8 is kind of important though. It tells you where to send the form. If you have MOHELA as a loan servicer already, you can actually upload the form to your portal, and it's best to do that if you have the option. For folks who don't have MOHELA as their current servicer, you will have to either mail or fax these forms to them. A quick tip on mailing your forms in is you can get tracking information on that piece of mail if you want to be sure it's arrived there and know exactly when it's arrived. So mail or fax, or if you have the option, go ahead and upload. So again, we can't speak to how every government or nonprofit job is going to want you to submit these forms, but we can give you a glimpse into how Penn State processes these forms. So if you don't work at Penn State or are trying to get employment certified from previous nonprofit jobs, the PSLF help tool might be the way to go. But for Penn State staff, here's what to do. You want to log into WorkLion, click this box on the side that says Ask HR. From there, this is what will come up, and it's really simple from here. So on the first dropdown, you want to select General Inquiry. You can do not applicable for specifically, and then in the subject, you want to make sure you write PSLF certification. Then you can attach your form. In inquiry details, you might want to write something like, please certify my employment with Penn State for PSLF. And then you can submit it. It's really that simple. Quick reminder, don't put your Social Security number on the form that you are submitting because this portal, well, I'm actually not sure if this portal is secure, but I do know they're going to send it back to you via email. And that portal is not secure. So we don't want your social floating around on the web, right? So leave that out, submit your form. This form will come back to you via email. They will fill out your employment info, how long you've worked with Penn State, and your average hours. HR has actually shared with us that their goal is to have these forms back to you in 24 to 48 hours. So this is a quick turnaround with your form here. And if you have direct loans, right, you'll submit this form to certify your employment. You'll get this form back. You'll fill in your social and sign, and then you'll package it with anything else you have and send it off to MOHELA. If you don't have direct, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Allie. I just wanted to chime in. Because I think it's relevant to remind everyone, I had said earlier, like, be monitoring your progress towards PSLF annually. This form you can resubmit to your employer annually to confirm employment, right? To verify employment for the last 12 months and to make sure then that those 12 months of repayment are connected together when you send this form back to MOHELA year after year. That was also a question that was coming up, but I figure now is a good time to plug that in. Like, submit this every year to have your employment verified.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like you can and should submit this every year to have your employment verified, because public service loan forgiveness is a program, but it's not a program that someone's going to keep you on track. Someone else is going to keep you on track. Like you really have to keep yourself on track, and submitting these forms annually is the best way to keep yourself on track and make sure that you're making the progress that you think that you're making, right? So yeah, you submit this form, you get it back, you fill in your social sign, package it up, and send it off to MOHELA. If you don't have direct loans, it's a little more complicated. You just need to consolidate first and then kind of go through that same process, right? So simple, easy enough, right? Maybe not. So we are here to help. We do offer public service loan forgiveness consults one-on-one. And we want to highlight here, we have limited availability to meet with faculty and staff just because our services are really student-centered. So we may need to prioritize here people who have these loans that need to be consolidated. So federally or commercially held FFEL loans, Perkins or HEAL loans, or Parent Plus loans. If you have loans that are not direct loans and want to meet with us, please email us at finlit@psu.edu to set up an appointment. We're happy to talk to you. We can also answer additional PSLF questions through that email, if not through an appointment. If you're someone who has direct loans, we do ask that you try to go through this process yourself and submit your forms and just go through the whole shebang. We can help, but for these direct loans that are a little bit more simple, we do ask that you try it first so we can prioritize working through some of these more complex situations with folks. So this is the end of our planned content, and we'll get into questions here in just a minute. But while we have you, we wanted to do a super quick run through of our services here. So if this is the first time you're hearing of the Financial and Life Skills Center at Penn State, you're kind of aware of how else we can help you. So these are some of our biggest services that we offer. We offer one-on-one appointments to students. Students can schedule those via Starfish. We do group presentations and webinars, much like this one. We do have a regular webinar series that lots of Penn State staff and faculty attend. So I wanted to kind of plug that to you guys too. We cover lots of different financial literacy topics in our webinars. Those happen every other Tuesday at noon. And our next one is next Tuesday. We're covering salary negotiation, which is such a great skill. We've got our self-study modules on our website. Those are through Canvas and they're actually open to the public. So anyone can access those. And we've also got a mentoring program where students connect with alumni or other folks associated with Penn State and get some good life skills through mentoring. So you can find all of these services on our website, which you can scan the QR code to go to, or it's also financialliteracy.psu.edu. All right, so thank you so much for joining us today. We do hope this was helpful and we are glad that you attended today. Please tell your friends and colleagues about this program if you think that they might benefit from it.